All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Young Professionals portion of the 2021 virtual NWATA District 10 Student Symposium. And with me, I have three esteemed athletic trainers from the Pacific Northwest area. First up, I have Kylie Gehring, who is the assistant athletic trainer at Gonzaga University, and her sports are volleyball and women's rowing. And she joined the Gonzaga University Sports Medicine staff in 2019 and is responsible for both volleyball and women's rowing. And we also have Mitchell Willert, who is currently in his second year as the clinical coordinator for the University of Montana, the athletic training program there. And he is also in his fourth year working with the Missoula Junior Bruins hockey team. And we also have Omar Furcha, who currently works as an athletic trainer in the industrial setting for WorkRight Northwest. And he manages multiple accounts and leads a team of ATs and PTs at various sites while also practicing on-site in various warehouses and manufacturing plants. He's also a former graduate of Washington State University, go Cougs, and currently lives in Portland, Oregon with his wife and two dogs. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here and for your insightful time. And really what we're going to try to do here is we've gotten questions from different programs that students have just asked, wondering what the profession is going to be like, what are some challenges you guys have faced. So I have those questions in front of me, and I feel like we're just going to bounce them around, have a pretty good, insightful conversation, and hopefully make some better athletic trainers out of our students. How's that sound? Sound good? All right, perfect. So our first question that we have is, what advice do you give to some people trying to search for a job, whether that be interviews, how to stand apart from others? I assume that's pretty broad. So we started broad, but we'll go narrow. So anybody can go first.
I'll start if that's okay with everybody.
Perfect.
I think like one thing that was really huge for me is, like you kind of mentioned even in the question, number one, like figuring out what makes you different, whether like that's part of something in your clinical rotation, but having the awareness that like there's going to be so many people with the exact same qualifications, the exact same number of clinical hours and all of that going on. So what makes it different? Like, did you help take somebody through an ACL rehab? Did you have some really super great insight in a program that has a huge emphasis on mental health? Did you get to help with movement screens? What makes you different? What are you passionate about? And then I think even more so than that, like really work your network. Don't be afraid to reach out to specific schools and just get your name out there. Even if you don't have a direct connection, I mean, you'll be surprised by how small our profession is and how many connections you actually might have already that you will figure out if you just talk to people. But even if there's not a job posting, like do the reach out, do ask about like if they have heard anything in their area. And then what that does is it plants a seed in their head. So if you make a good impression and they do have that name in their mind, they're going to be like, hey, I remember talking to Mitchell earlier this year and he was looking for something and he seemed cool. So I'm going to reach back out to him now that I have the inside scoop that we might be hiring, like you might even figure out before others do. So really, really highly encourage the network as well.
I can go second here. So I'll kind of go on the interview side. I think a lot of the students are just throwing applications at a lot of jobs, right? You've got the pressure to get a job and so forth. But once you land an interview, I think one of the most important parts is truly trying to be yourself in that interview, right? And I think the easiest way to do that is to do your homework, be prepared for the interview. So I would like to, look and see who might be in my interview with me, where they went to school maybe. And then also things like when I was applying for my job, or back when I was a GA for this position, I was looking at what interests me about the area, because I'm also interviewing the interviewer to see if it's a good fit for myself. So I was like, all right, sweet. I'm 3 hours from Glacier National Park. I'm 4 hours from Yellowstone, all these things that are going to make me happy on the outside of work as well. And then once I did all my homework, when I got into the interview, I just felt comfortable and I was able to be myself. I was able to articulate myself better. And I really think that gives the interviewers a better insight to who you are as a person, because ultimately, right, they're working with you as a clinician, but also they have to put up with you as a person as well. So if that's not a great fit, then, you know, maybe they won't pick you, but maybe they really like your personality and you have the same clinical hours as everybody else, but that personality puts you over the top. That could be something as well. So that's just a little tidbit.
To piggyback off of both Mitch and Kylie, is a lot of it is, you know, know what you're good at and then lean into those strengths in your interviews and while you're looking, and don't be afraid to try something new. We have such a unique skill set as athletic trainers that it transitions and translates across a lot of different fields, which is why we're kind of all over the place. But even if you want that D1 gig, going into a place like industry or high school is not going to pigeonhole you as much as you think it is. So don't talk yourself into a rut before you even get the chance. A lot of it's building that experience and building that skill set, and then how you use that. And then like Kylie said, you know, the same skills you use at the D1 level, same skills you use at the high school level, you leverage your network and you continue to build out upon that. You might get that job you want to in a different setting. So I think those are the big things I've learned about is, you know, don't focus in what you want right now. You know, develop what you need to get to where you want to go. You know, because you're still learning, you're still growing. You know, and you still got to continue to build it.
Yeah, that seems like a lot of great insight there. Just being open-minded almost, and caring for yourself too, not only for like the athletes or whoever you're gonna have working for, but caring for yourself and just kind of knowing where you'll fit best. So I like that. When searching for jobs, did you guys only use the NATA website for job searches?
I can go.
Go ahead.
I did at the beginning, and I think I limited to myself a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there on Indeed and all those other places. But then also I found my current job through my program director, who just threw it out there because someone reached out to her. So I spent a lot of time on NATA and living and dying by that.
I would say I spent the most time on NATA because that's kind of when it becomes more of an official job posting most of the time. I did keep an eye on Indeed, and I think Monster was another random one because sometimes that'll give you just like a preview of what might be popping up on the NATA site. And then, like I alluded to before, just kept in contact with those around me. And like, I was very specific in the area I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in Washington or Oregon. So I was really diligent about continuing to be in contact with people I knew in those areas and asking about if they knew of anybody in that area in these specific settings that might be hiring in the future. So that's kind of where I went with that.
Yeah, seems like networking is a big thing.
For sure. I pretty much solely did, so coming out of undergrad, I got my BS in athletic training. So I used NATA to find the graduate assistant position at University of Montana, got that job, and then ended up just rolling into the clinical coordinator position. So I didn't necessarily have to apply for it. So I kind of got lucky on that. So the one time I've been looking for a job, I used NATA. So
nice. I feel like that's a good starting point for a lot of people is NATA, and I'm glad a lot of people just know about that in general. So still talking kind of about interviews in general, how long in the interview process, should you wait to talk about salary?
I think go ahead, Omar.
So say it's a great question. I would save that one for the second interview, or at least to where you know that you have a pretty good inkling that you're going to get the job. I mean, because at least from my experience, we know that we're not making buco bucks, but you should also care about, you know, cost of living and where you're going and that kind of stuff. So, but coming in full flame with the how much you're going to make might be a little offsetting to some people.
Yeah, I would voice the same thing. I definitely wouldn't do it on the first interview. I'd wait and see, you know, how much interest they have in myself and so forth. And sometimes they even prefer, you know, depending where you're going, you might not even be talking to that interviewer about that. You might be talking to HR or someone like that. So, waiting till the second one, maybe waiting till the third. You can always ask, like, when will we know more about potential salary and so forth, or asking about, like, a good question might be, what is cost of living out there? Like, what does it cost to rent an apartment or something like that, and maybe that's something you ask on the second interview leading up to then the salary question later on, because obviously that matters quite a bit, but definitely not in the first one.
Yeah, I'll echo that too. And then one thing small to add, just keeping in mind that when you are in a position that they have now offered, that's kind of that now they want you. Now it's an okay thing to have that conversation about what that salary looks like. And if you do want to try and ask for more or a certain benefit, that's your time to shine. It's kind of hard to do that right out the gates when you're just freshly graduated, but especially as you become more established, I think that's definitely something you can do once offered.
Yeah. And going off of that, actually, a lot of our questions coming in were about money, which was weird. But our next one is asking for more money for an internship position as someone with a master's degree versus a bachelor's overstepping, or is it kind of acceptable or encouraged?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and we're going to see more of it as we go on. I don't really have a great answer for that, besides the answer of the way I view the internship is what the graduate assistantship used to be, right? I came out with my bachelor's degree. There are definitely tweaks that we've made for the master's degree as far as requirements through Katie and so forth. But the main things of what I learned and got my bachelor's in is the main objects that I'm teaching in the master's program as well. And instead of an internship, I went to my graduate assistant to get that master's degree to then qualify myself to work at the college level. And now they're using internships to get you those 2 years of experience that a graduate assistantship would have gotten you in the past. So I don't necessarily think that coming out with a degree, an MAT versus a BS in athletic training would qualify you more as far as asking for more money. But you certainly can ask for more money. I guess it doesn't hurt to ask. I kind of doubt for an internship they're going to bend very much, but that's a tidbit.
I'll just echo that too. I think especially for an internship, they have most times have a pretty set budget of what they're able to offer. But again, like the worst that they can say is no. So even if you do have questions about like a benefit or what hours are going to be counted toward your total, or like I know at WSU with their internship, they're technically hourly paid, but you get kind of paid more like a salary. So you can at least ask some segue questions into making sure that you're at least being paid enough to live and whatnot. So, and I do think like with how new the master's requirement is in our profession, we will see changes over time, but only time will tell at this point.
I don't really have too much more to add, as in the only thing maybe even reframing the question, instead of asking for more money, ask if there's other ways for you to earn more money other than what they're paying for you. And that might lead to some extra funding too. And I think it's going to be a learning curve with everything. But also, I mean, if you're looking at just internships at the college level, there are internships popping up in the industrial setting now too, which might pay more, I guess, even closer to a real salary versus, other things. So like I said, going back to, again, being open to trying new things, and not being tunnel vision into one setting.
Yeah. I will say, I do like that we have 3 different people from 3 different settings. I think that's awesome that we just have that. And that kind of gets into our next one. What influenced you to go into your setting, and are you enjoying it right now?
I mean, I think for me, the college setting is so ideal because it's just like a good middle ground. You're working with really elite athletes still, people who are really competitive and want to get back and super serious about their sport. But what's really important to me is also having an impact on their daily life and kind of watching them grow as a person and being able to have a long-term impact versus, at a high school level, they're a little bit fresher. You're getting like somebody who's kind of still growing into themselves, and a little bit in college too. And this is all hearsay from friends who are in other settings, of course, and then like in a professional setting, it's like you're almost more like coworkers in a way, because they're kind of like, that's their day job at that point. So I really like the journey. I like to watch the journey with them. I think it's super special and rewarding in that way. And yes, I would say this year has been crazy, but I still really love where I work and I love the setting I'm in. So it makes it super worth it for me.
Yeah, I would say my journey to where I'm at right now, I definitely would not have said I would be where I am now when I graduated and came here for my GA position. I came into it wanting to stick with hockey. I played hockey my entire life and wanted to work in hockey. Came here to get a new experience, and I got it, certainly. And I have a unique position right now, being half clinical and half in the academic world. And that kind of meshed well. When I was in undergrad, I either wanted to be a teacher or I wanted to work in athletic training. So, I honestly thought I was going to work at the college level or at the professional level with hockey, and fell in love with where I'm at. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. But the junior team that I work with, most of them don't even have jobs. They're between 16 and 20 years old. They're playing hockey. They're being 16 to 20-year-olds. And then I also work with the youth side. So I get a wide array. It's very unique, but I certainly enjoy it.
And then I came at my current position a little differently. I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and this was the best option I had available. And I did not want to go into the industrial setting. But getting into it, I learned a few different things. Quality of life is super important, especially when you're married. So working, starting at 4 and being done at 2, some days is pretty awesome. Not having Fridays because you're not on site and working from home has been great. So those things matter. Having every weekend off is even more spectacular. But then also, I still get the opportunity to go out there and sling tape and do that sideline athletic training, working with youth sports and rugby and picking up random college things like that. So there's a lot of availability and variables with the industrial setting that's given it to me. But then the kind of pair off what Kylie was saying about getting to work with the athlete and see them grow, I get to take that and I'd say exponentially increase it, because I get to see someone go from their 30s and maybe work into retirement, or see someone who's been in a trade for so long and give them the ability to go home and retire in a healthy position versus being broken down from a job that they've done for the last 30 years. So it really gives us a unique perspective to change the way healthcare is managed and bring what the athletes have every day at every level into a working class that doesn't have access and the know-how to get to someone to, how do I fix my hamstring that's really tight, or how do I fix this position? It's so the impact that I've noticed is great, and it's bigger than I expected, and I've loved every minute since I've been doing it. And to kind of top it off, there really is no limit or ceiling to where I'm going. So growing within the position, if you're looking to get to a certain position, you really do have a lot of growth within this area.
That's awesome. Definitely opening a lot of people's eyes about industrial has been huge recently. That's definitely a big growing field now. So I like that a lot. How do you guys deal with assignments that can feel a little bit overwhelming at times, especially as a new-ish athletic trainer in the setting?
I can take that one first. I would say you deal with it like you deal with a football practice. You triage, you figure out what's most important and what's critical, and then you take that first step there, and then you work your way down. And that's the way that it's worked best for me, and kind of way I've looked at it. Everyone's going to want to be more important than the other ones, but kind of your job is identifying where's the biggest risk and then making the appropriate steps in that direction, the mitigating that. So figuring out what's the higher risk problem and then going from there.
I saw you going for the or the unmute, Mitchell, but I beat you. I would agree. I think triaging is a great way to look at it. I like to say, like, I back burner a lot of things when I have to put out new fires. So that's one big thing. I also will add kind of really do some self-reflection and figure out what your big boundaries are. Like, it's really hard in our profession because it is so unique. We do a little bit of everything and we care a lot and we love our jobs. That's why we're where we're at. But yeah, what are your non-negotiables, and like find a way to implement those things so that you're giving yourself what you need to, at least, even if it's a little bit less while you're in season or at like a super high intensity time of the year, but just do what you can for yourself as well, is what I would say.
Yeah, I would kind of second that. Looking back at my first year as a GA, anytime anybody would ask like, hey, can you come in tomorrow to do this treatment or something like that, I would always say yes. And then you end up working 100 days in a row and you're burned out and you're tired. So looking out for yourself, setting those boundaries, it's hard when you first get into it. But also I would say the people that you view as role models now, or like maybe it's a preceptor, maybe it's your program director, whoever, don't be afraid to reach out to them and to explain your situation, talk to them about it, and ask like, what would you do here? Ask for their advice. I still talk to my preceptor that I had my senior year in our program, and we'll just chit chat and I'll bounce ideas off of them. Because I mean, realistically, when you graduate, you're an entry level athletic trainer. Nobody is expecting you to be perfect, and you probably haven't been through that situation before. So it's okay to reach out to somebody who might have, and you take their advice and you morph it into what you want to do and how you want to handle it. And it can't hurt to ask.
Yeah. I just want to add,
big thing too.
You made me think of something, Mitchell, but once you are in more of a long-term place too, I think it can be super, super valuable to ask someone to be your mentor that you feel comfortable with, because I think there is a lot that comes with somebody knowing also your setting, and like Mitchell said as well, like there's going to be a lot of things that you've just never experienced, and that's totally okay because we've all been there. So yeah, I would really, really encourage asking when you need it.
I think that's a good lesson for students themselves to learn. I'll definitely be taking that into my next year of schooling, just triaging. That's a great word. I didn't even think of putting that into school aspects, so I like that. Transitioning into the field from like when you finally got your first job, going into the field versus clinical experience, what did you find was some of the easier things to do, and what were some of the harder things to do? And did you ever like feel fully prepared to be like in the clinical field, or was it a lot of just learn it as you go?
I'll tell you what, organ admin's a more important class than you make it out to be. So don't neglect it. Don't shy away from it. Really take that stuff seriously. The clinical stuff, I think that just comes with experience, and the more hands-on you get, the better off you're going to be. And that just, staying up to date, being a good clinician. And I think everyone I've seen too has always been, really good at the Lockmans and doing that kind of clinical stuff. It's some of the nuances, the stuff that behind the stuff, scenes things that got lost. And I mean, working in like even the high school and trying to manage an athletic training room and program, it was, I wanted to do nothing but be on the field, but there's a lot of stuff you have to do in the back end office, EMR, that kind of thing. So I'd say prepare yourself for the admin side of things.
I'll go this time, Kylie. So I would agree. I think documentation was probably one of the harder things for me to grasp onto, not necessarily because I didn't know how to document, but figuring out what system was best for myself. So was it every day after I get done with work, do I spend an hour and a half when I get home documenting? Am I doing it as I go if I have downtime? Am I doing it the next morning? Whereas, I would write down things, but then I would just transfer it into the computer system. Figuring that out was probably one of the hardest things. And then along the way, altering that system, figuring out, okay, what is working, what is not, why, and so forth. And then also, I think one of the easier things for me, and I think this a lot came from the experience that I had as a senior, I was in charge of relaying information to the coaches. I was very much almost like a coworker to my preceptor, and that helped me so much when it came into working clinically, being on the sidelines, and with hockey, right? We're shifting players every 45 seconds to a minute and a half. So do I take the 10 minutes to do a full eval before I tell coach like yes or no, they can continue to go, and I give them a specific diagnosis? Or am I saying they're done for the game, you got to plan for somebody else, or I need 5 more minutes, and being able to do that portion. So I think I was prepared for that. I felt like overall I was prepared, but a lot of things are just from experience. There's a lot of things you just do not get to see as a student, and that's 100% okay.
I will second all of that. I think it's all super important. I think one thing that Mitchell actually alluded to being pretty easy for him, that was a little difficult for me, was being like on the spot at practice, coach breathing down your throat, and you're making a decision. Boom. You don't get to do that a lot as a student, right? And like, that's okay. But just feeling okay about being like taking a moment if you need to and getting through there, like through it, I think it's really hard as a young professional first starting out to be in this like in between of, I know my stuff. I haven't seen it all yet, but I know my stuff. And I'm also trying to prove myself. And then like being afraid to ask for that help, or like forgetting to continue to reassess your progress in yourself and ask people around you how you're doing. I think that's super, super important. Even with Mitchell's documentation story, I mean, like there's going to be a few things like that, like whether it's documentation or like, how does this specific setting do our insurance referrals? How are we handling referrals to physicians? Like, what does this setting do for that specific scenario? But just, you're going to continue to learn it and get better every time, and give yourself some grace in that beginning period and just be cool with it. Like, it doesn't mean that you don't know your stuff. You do know your stuff. That's why you're there. But just allowing yourself to continue to grow, I think, is super, super important.
Yeah. I think the big thing is confidence.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. I think it's okay to say you don't know, but you're going to go find that answer and go from there, because even in the most dire situations, they're going to put a new person out on the field anyways, or they're going to put a new person in the in the employee spot. So being honest with yourself and not trying to, make up stuff when you don't know things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. Sorry, Kylie. I think a lot of it has to do with figuring out what kind of coach you have. Like, what kind of coaching staff do you have? And having that conversation first at the beginning of the year. And it's going to be hard because you're coming in, like, when I came in, I'm 22 years old. I look like I'm 14. I'm 26 now. I still look like I'm 16. And, that's just an added piece to it. But I remember having a conversation and just saying to coach, like, this is how I want to operate, but what are your expectations? Are you somebody that's going to be breathing down my neck, or are you going to give me the time of day to figure this out? And, they may tell you like, oh yeah, do your thing, but then heat of the moment, they'll get mad at you or whatever. That's okay. And you can adjust on the fly. But I think figuring out and trying to build that rapport with the coaches is super important. And that, just comes from experience as well. I've gotten very lucky. I've had 3 different coaching staffs in 4 years, and all of them have been very different, but all of them have been good to work with, easy to work with. Certainly they are not happy with me sometimes. That's the nature of the beast, but they've at least been good enough to work with.
One thing I was just going to say in relation to what Omar mentioned about it's okay to take a pause if you need to. I think I've heard this key phrase in our athletic training room from almost everybody, but just I'm going to work on that. Thank you. Like, I'm going to work on that for us, whatever, just so they know, like, it's in their mind, like, okay, it's in rotation here. We're not getting forgotten about. And then I think with what Mitchell said too, like, that's been something that's been super successful for me is really starting out first and foremost with your staff and with coaches, because everybody is a little bit different and they're all going to have their own little niches here and there. So whatever they want to prioritize and whatever is important, and take note of that. And a lot of times you are going to have to change on the fly because there's going to be things we didn't think about. But I think that's a great way to kind of mitigate down the road, at least.
I like what you said, Mitchell, about documentation, because I definitely have the memory of like a goldfish. So I know that I will have to be writing things down and then entering them later. So definitely knowing documentation is definitely a good thing. And you guys talked about organ admin a lot. And yeah, that's definitely something we don't go into as much in clinical stuff. So hopefully we'll get to do that when we get back in it. So actually talking about, I know Omar mentioned clinical or classes stuff. Was there one thing, if you were to go back and tell your previous athletic training student self, what is the one thing to focus on in the clinical or classes right now that you wished you would focus more on? And the answer can be organ admin or documentation.
I think, and I was pretty lucky with my preceptors because I think that they did a really good job of incorporating it, even though I wasn't asking all the time. But ask them about the things like work-life balance and what kind of boundaries they have, like the things you don't see every single day. Like the clinical stuff's obviously very important, but you're going to kind of do that naturally. I think it's really important to like ask how they responded to a difficult email from a parent, or how they triaged a coach situation, how they communicate with strength staff if you have some strength staff on staff with you, things like that you're not seeing on a day-to-day basis, and that's going to have a really big effect on just like you and your mental health. And I don't even like to say work-life balance, honestly. I think work-life integration, for me at least, is better. But yeah, so I think those are really big things. And like I said, my preceptors did a great job of like cueing me in on like, hey, this is something that's real that you deal with. Like, but definitely ask, because we're more open to it than you think.
Work-life integration, I really like that. And I think that kind of stems it into a thing is knowing what you want to be, what kind of clinician you want to be, and going from there. I think if I were to go back into grad or undergrad, I would think about like, what kind of clinician do I want to be coming out of this? Like, do I want to be more of a rehab base, or more preventative base, or more education based, and then kind of cater my education to that and kind of really focus in and dive in, because I don't think I needed to learn as much or spend as much time on like therapeutic modalities. I mean, ultrasound and E-stim are great, but they're really not going to make you the AT you want to be. Maybe spending a little more time on the manual stuff, or learning different techniques in that realm, or spending more time in organ admin and learning how to be a stronger leader and advisor to the newer generation. I think that would be where I would spend most of my time.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything like super specific. I think the work-life integration for sure, like when you're a student, you don't necessarily think that you're going to get burned out or anything like that, or even when you're a young professional. So I guess probably asking those questions, figuring out what, maybe even not like how do you deal with this, but more of what have you experienced thus far that maybe burned you out at one point or another, and what did you do at that time? Maybe asking some more of those questions. But overall, I think I got lucky and just had a lot of good experiences. So I can't pinpoint anything else.
That's definitely something, at least is a normal question that I feel like a lot of students are going to look back on and have different answers. So it's good to just hear different insights. Kind of going back to almost the interview or job searching process, when thinking about a resume, how many years back should someone go when listing previous job experience, and how broad should they make it?
That's a good question. Especially like, right, when you're going for your first job, like I was looking back and I'm like, I don't know, like, do I put my cops bag boy job on there that I had in high school? Like realistically, no, you shouldn't, because that doesn't really matter. So going through and sifting through some of those things, I went back a couple of years. I would say probably I went back 3 years. But the only things that I put in there were things that I thought, if they were to ask me of like, how do you think that benefits you in the future? Like, for example, I've been a hockey official since I was 12. And I was asked about it. And I said, I thought that I learned how to deal with adverse situations, especially communicating with coaches who are upset or yelling at me or whatever, which happens on a daily basis when you're officiating. And so I thought it was something that benefited me, that was going to make me and did make me a better athletic trainer, rather than knowing not to put the dishwasher detergent in with the tomatoes, right? That was not something that I use now. So that's a roundabout answer, but.
I think, especially when you're first coming out of it, adding something that's some identifying factor to your resume. A lot of people would, a lot of us have gone through the football rotation or worked as a third year as football or for whatever sport it is. And the ins and outs of that is pretty similar across the board, but what did you do differently in that scenario is what I would add. So maybe not so much, maybe more like focus on your bullet points. Just don't add what everyone else is doing. Add some stuff to what you did, what made it unique to you, and what you added to that. And then, I don't think I'd go back much further than 1 or 2 jobs, honestly, for that. I think there's a lot of other aspects of the resume that people care about, such as some of the, like volunteer work and that. So knowing what you're applying for, knowing that area and what they value is what will shape your resume.
Yeah, I would say, depending on like, I think it'll be a little bit different if you're coming straight out of bachelor's program or a master's program. I went back also, I think the 2 years, so to include the clinical rotations. And then I did have a job while I was in grad school, which wasn't 100% relevant to athletic training, but I was like a tutor, and I did include that on there because, again, with intention, there was a reason that if I was asked about that, I could then show that I was able to balance a really big course load and clinical rotations and a job. Like I was adaptable and I was flexible in that way. But again, like I didn't go back into anything besides like volunteer wise. I didn't go back into my high school job at a music store necessarily. You can make your argument either way of like maybe you were a translator at that music store or something. That would be cool. Include that. Like that's really relevant experience and put that in your bullet point. But in terms of the bullet points too, I want to emphasize what Omar said. Don't just list like I restocked tape and I filled coolers and I did these things. We want to know that you were overseen and got to have autonomy in taking an athlete back from a lateral ankle sprain all the way to return to play. And your preceptor asked for your insight on that return to play. Like we want to know, we want to see that kind of stuff, not just the usual. Like we'll kind of assume that like we're doing it too, so really what makes it special more so than anything.
Yeah. And that seems kind of encouraging to students now to go volunteer for stuff, go volunteer for, at least here we have the opportunity to help volunteer with Special Olympics. And so that could be another thing that you guys were talking about, of having parents or coaches breathe down your neck the whole time. And that's definitely something where I feel like you would get that a lot. So kind of getting into our last couple, kind of now with, because you all have been ATs before COVID and now with COVID, how has that impacted your experience and impacted your day-to-day life?
I can go first. it definitely impacted my day-to-day life, as it did all of ours. But because of the restrictions, we were unable to have any home games. And because of other restrictions, I didn't really go on the road at all. So I was working practice Monday through Thursday, having to implement, COVID precautions and all that jazz, which was a headache to begin with, really hard to tackle, as we all had to go through. But it also kind of opened up my eyes to, what I wanted to do in the future of moving towards academia a little bit more. I got to spend so much more time with my wife and go ski and like go enjoy things that I hadn't been able to do before. And so that was like an unexpected upside to it. But we had our first home games again for like first ones in 4 months last weekend, and it was a blast. It was like reinvigorating to have like a full, really like 6 months to not really practice as an athletic trainer and come back and have that fire lit underneath my behind again. So it was challenging, no doubt, but there was a silver lining to it for myself, at least.
I think for me, I totally agree. I mean, 100% had an impact on day-to-day life, both at work and personally. One thing that it did show me is that I really do like the people I work with, because we were on Zoom meetings with each other every minute of the day, it seemed like. So I'm like, oh, thank God I'm in a place I really like, because that just goes to show like it really is important who you surround yourself with. And it so is important to have a good fit. And you really, like we alluded to earlier, like you're interviewing them too a little bit, right? So I think that's one big thing. I also think like it does show you how adaptable athletic trainers are, that we can just be like, yep, okay, bring on another skill. Like I'm just going to learn how to COVID test 20 people at a time now and then head to practice. Like, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, obviously I don't think any of us really anticipated something like that. My undergrad major was actually public health. So I also never thought that I was going to be using that as much as I have. But I also think that just in general at work, there's going to be a lot of things that might stick around. Like, hey, maybe it's okay to like leave when we can and do injury reports at home. And my hope is that this kind of sticks within our profession, and we can see the benefit of having quality over quantity in multiple ways at practice and everything else. The one big thing that did change with our sports is that we were all pushed to spring. So we have all sports in season right now, which has been super chaotic, but we're all hanging in there. And I guess one other change, now I'm just rambling, but one other change we did have too was I help with the mental health side of things and like our protocols and all of that. So we did have a huge uptick in that, but it really did light a fire for us to get more licensed mental health counselors on board and stuff. So again, like some good has really come from this, and I'm grateful for that at least. And hopefully we're reaching toward the end here. I don't know, fingers crossed.
Thanks for jinxing it, Kylie. That's what I wouldn't expect anything less from a Gonzaga person, though. I mean, that's just what they do. They like to ruin the world. I think coming out of COVID, not coming out of COVID. See, you've already ruined me. Sticking in through COVID is just realizing how unstable our jobs can be. Because I mean, if I was back in the high school, which is where I was before, I probably wouldn't have a job right now, or maybe just getting back into it. And depending on what kind of contract you worked out for your high school, it's a little scary to think about that. And there's a lot of people struggling with it. So just being thankful that I survived with a job for the whole team and not had to go on unemployment like my wife did, who is an athletic trainer in the orthopedic clinic setting for a certain amount of time. I think that's changed. And then getting used to pivoting your skills from doing evals in person and getting to see actual stuff versus doing it online. I mean, it's really hard to see or distinguish swelling in a knee on a video camera when they can't even get it over their entire knee or zoom out or move it away closer. I mean, so those things, and being, I guess, patient and adjusting throughout all those things has been the biggest thing through COVID. But your skill set is transferable from in person to out here to the virtual world. So I think it's going to create a lot more opportunities for us to do this and reach a lot more people.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people, that how great our profession is even through COVID, that we've still get to be still have gotten to do stuff, and just kind of just shows how adaptable we kind of are. And so I love that. And kind of getting into the final question, we've been sitting here a while. I assume people are kind of getting zoned out. So if you want students to take away one thing today, what is the one thing you would want them to hear?
I can go first. I think I've been saying it this whole time. I would just say, be open to whatever experience you have the opportunity for, whether it's high school, orthopedic setting, D1, D3, youth sports, starting your own business. Take whatever opportunity you can and run with it, because your skill sets and your motivation and efforts, what's going to get you there. And then your skill sets just kind of help you, make you look a little bit better. But you're going to be helping people regardless of what you're doing, whether it's D1 versus industrial versus teaching. And that's kind of why we got into this gig. It was to help people.
Guess I'll go. I would say, like we've talked about, it's okay to be wrong, right? I look back at, I have my first graduate assistant that's working with me right now, and it's brought back a lot of things for myself of, there were so many times in my first several years, and it still happens. I'm in my 4th year as an athletic trainer. There are a lot of times you're going to be wrong, and that's okay. And it's okay to not know what's going on and refer to your orthopedic doc or refer someone out, because they might know and maybe they don't. But being okay with that, being comfortable with it, and then also just learning from it rather than just being down on yourself, learning from it and reflecting on it. And kind of touching on that last part, I think reflecting on how you are performing as a professional, reflecting on what you need to work on, I think that's a huge portion as well. Use the people that are around you. My first year, I sat down with my coach every couple of months and I said, what can I improve on your side of things? And I did the same thing with my coworkers, and just always trying to find some way to improve so that you're not just remaining stagnant.
I feel like it's a lot of pressure to just pick one thing, because there's so much good stuff.
It could be multiple.
No, then I'll just ramble again. I think one big thing that I want to point out is, like, again, how great our profession is and the opportunities that we do have to reach out to so many different people. And we really are that like gray area in a lot of ways. Like, we get contact with so many different people. And so really find what you love about our profession, like find what you're good at, continue to reflect and kind of hone in on that. And also know that it doesn't need to be like a one size fits all approach. Like, you can work college athletics or a professional setting and still have a family. Like, you can really be living the dream in a PT clinic. Like, you're going to continue to learn as you go. You're going to continue to like figure out what it is that sings your song a little bit, and just keep rolling with it. Our profession is growing, like we're getting more notoriety. So hang in there, continue to push through, and yeah, just keep reflecting, keep growing.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love everything you guys said, and I'm definitely now a better AT because of what I've heard today. So thank you guys for all of your insights, and I hope everyone else enjoys the rest of the Student Symposium. So thank you again to Kylie, Mitchell, and Omar for your time, and I hope everybody is having a safe, healthy, and a happy time in the world. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.